Well, no matter how we want to put it, the word co-parenting is a hoax. The parent living with kids is the only one doing the parenting. The parent who picks the kids every other weekend and takes them out and returns them is not doing parenting. That is pizza parent. Now, what I just read to you is a quote that I just recently ran into on a Facebook post by a friend that I went to school with in Maseno many years ago. I don't necessarily agree with the whole thing, but as I read, it's a much, much longer post. When I read through it, it got me thinking about this issue of co-parenting, especially as it applies to those of us who are living in diaspora and are planning to return. So that is what I want to spend a few minutes with you this afternoon to share with you some of the things that I've run into. But in general, I'll start by saying that the gift of parenting comes in all kinds of ways. Some of us get kids or become parents biologically, others through adoption, others through love. But I think the responsibility of raising young ones really does not change as a function of how one arrives at parenting. In the same breath, no one is a better parent as a function of how they became parents. So to me, it does not matter whether you adopted, you had biological kids, whatnot. A parent is a parent either way. So today, let's talk about the issue of co-parenting among Kenyan American diasporans. Many Kenyan American returnees find themselves in this part, often due to events beyond their control. But anyway, before we do that, good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Kisumu. This is Western Kenya. We are literally a few minutes away from Kisumu International Airport. And today I'm joining a friend, a really good friend of mine that I've known for many, many years. And she lives in diaspora. And she organized a party to celebrate her mom, who has done an exceptional job being her number one cheerleader. And so we came, we saw, we had lots of fun, and I'm going to let you in on all the activities of the day, hopefully packed into 10 minutes. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to our channel. We talk about all kinds of things that affect African diasporans, especially those of us who are planning to return to our motherland. And so we talk about all kinds of things, but most of it revolves around construction, around land, property, and just preparing to come back home. And so if you need help on those kinds of things, whether you are trying to build something, whether you're trying to renovate, you're looking for land and all kinds of things, feel free to reach out for help. My job is to evaluate your project, match you with the right experts, and supervise your project till it's done. So if you need help, reach out. But that aside, join me today. Let's talk about co-parenting, because I'm assuming some of the folks watching me right now are possibly involved in some kind of a co-parenting arrangement or have been there in the past. So overall, again, this is not some kind of professional advice. I don't do this professionally, and so take it for what it is. My opinions are specifically reflective of my very limited experiences. I always say that each time so that you don't come around and blame me for misquoting stuff. So anyway, I also believe that there's no single formula for doing co-parenting. I've seen all kinds of examples. Some of them work, others don't. I've never been in that position, but I've got many, many people in my circle who are co-parenting, some of them doing a really good job. So in all these examples that I've seen, I would say that at least among Kenyan returnees or Kenyan diasporans, I've seen co-parenting arrangements being influenced by about 10 main factors. There are more, but I'm going to highlight about 10 that are most common. The first one is that co-parenting arrangements can be influenced by how the partners arrived at co-parenting, and I'll explain later. The second factor is how reasonable the individuals are. Some people are very reasonable, others are not. Factor number 3 is whether or not the co-parents have other entanglements, whether romantic or otherwise. Number 4 is finance. Number 5 is culture. Number 6 is residency status. Number 7 is age of the kids. 8, family influence. Number 9, capacity to care. And then lastly, immigration status. So as I said earlier, there are many, many factors that I know influence or shape the co-parenting arrangements that I've seen. But these are the ones that frequently show up in our conversation. So I'm going to walk you through each one of them, see if this makes sense. So let's explore each one at a time. So let's start with number 1, which is co-parenting can be influenced by how folks get at that arrangement. And I've seen 2 scenarios. Now, number 1, there are some folks who become co-parents through mutual agreements. And typically, these are folks who started living together, dating, or getting married. And then for some reason, life as a married couple does not work. But they still decide to raise kids. And as we often say, you don't have to fail as a parent, even after failing in marriage. Because sometimes we can't figure out this married thing. And if that doesn't work, we don't have to fail on the parenting side as well. So you can still may have failed as a partner, but still be doing well as a parent. So through mutual arrangement, I've seen folks go separate ways. They agree on how to raise kids together. And I've seen some really beautiful examples to the point where people move on, they come together during holidays, they go on vacations together. And I see really beautiful things in that sense. In fact, this particular arrangement often has very minimal impact on kids, where folks find mutual ways to just coexist, co-parent, and make it work. But then you also have a bigger group of folks who arrive at co-parenting after some kind of an acrimonious separation. And of course, as is expected, you still have feelings that are hurt, some amount of harm done to either parent. There may be issues of revenge going on. And unfortunately, in many cases, these individuals tend to fight their battles through their kids. Now, this is the second example can be really harmful to kids. So that is one reason, one factor that explains co-parenting amongst diasporans. Reason number 2 is that the co-parenting arrangements that you might see may be influenced by how reasonable the individuals involved are. I've met many folks. I would even argue that the majority of folks in my circle are often very reasonable, fair-minded, who often have a very developed sense of compromise, tend to empathize, often apply wisdom, and are very rational. So those folks I see tend to do better with co-parenting compared to folks who are very unreasonable, perhaps self-centered, irrational, narcissistic, and often show evidence of poor judgment. So the reasonable group tend to do really well with co-parenting. And in fact, they're more likely to even stick around in marriage than the second group. So I hope if you ever find yourself in this part, then maybe your co-parent or the other partner is a reasonable person. Then reason number 3 is that the co-parenting arrangements that I've seen in diaspora may be influenced by whether or not these individuals involved have other entanglements involved. So people move on. After separation, people move on. Like one of my really good friends moved on, has a wife that is doing really well, and it's the wife who is so invested in the kids from his first marriage to the point where she's almost like a second mother to the kids from the first marriage. And it's really beautiful, something that is really admirable. But sometimes the new entanglement can do the exact opposite, and that can really complicate things. So then finances also come in, because typically it's almost impossible to find 2 partners that earn the same amount of money. And even if they do, we spend very differently. So while there's often an assumption that in America, women have an upper hand on issues, marriage and divorce and all that, you'd be surprised how that may not be true in many cases. Like I have a friend right now who is female, and she's the one paying child support to her male partner. And so, unfortunately, at the end of the day, the parent with more money can sometimes really influence things. And that may influence co-parenting arrangements. And unfortunately, sometimes actually the parents with more money can use their money to turn the kids against the parent without money. I've seen many of those cases. Now, culture also comes in where there's often an assumption within the Kenyan community that the mother should have the primary custody. In fact, this time round, when I was traveling to Kenya in December, for the first time, the immigration guy was asking me why I was traveling with my daughter by myself. Like I needed my wife's consent, and I had to explain to him that, hey, I'm just as a parent as my wife, and I don't need anybody's consent to do that. But apparently in Kenya, there's some kind of a requirement. I don't know how that works. And so there's cultural issues that we bring from Kenya that we try to apply in the West. That oftentimes we discover that many of those cultural things do not apply as soon as you cross the Kenyan borders. Then the issues of residency comes in. Different jurisdictions have different laws, because even within the US, once you cross state lines, there are very different rules. For example, if you live in Hawaii, child support does not stop at 18 necessarily. Trust me, you will find yourself paying child support way past 18. While in many states, of course, once the kids hit 18, child support is done. So jurisdiction matters. And this gets even more complicated when the party lives in a different place. Let's say one party lives in California, the other one lives in Hawaii. Those things can really be complicated. And then, of course, the age of kids come in. Younger kids bring in a lot more complexity compared to older ones. But what I've seen amongst the older kids in diaspora are cases where I've seen two, where it's the mother that raises the kids, and when the kids grow older, now when it comes to time for marriage, the kids want to bring their spouses to the father's house. And in one of those cases, actually, this young woman was getting married, so she had to look for her father, chose to look for her father, who never raised her. And on the day her guests came, they didn't even include the mother. So these things also happen later on, even with grown kids. Then we have family influence, where parents can also get involved in here. Then sometimes you're talking about capacity to care. Not every parent is in a place to be able to care for kids. And I'm not even talking finances. Some parents are struggling with mental health. Some have significant financial difficulties. And some have all kinds of things going on in life that may make it difficult for them to raise kids. And so when it comes to co-parenting, then a parent who really does not have the capacity to care for kids may not get an upper hand when it comes to time with the kids. And then, of course, the big issue of immigration comes in, where especially the one that I've seen get really complicated is where one parent lives in Kenya and the other parent lives in the US. So the one in Kenya keeps blackmailing the one in the US that they'll go to the US embassy and report their spouse in the US, especially when the spouse does not have legal paperwork. This is really common and is really terrible when the Kenyan spouse uses immigration status to really extort their partner in the US with whom they are co-parenting. That's a very common problem. So there are many, many scenarios out there that I know that we may not have all the time to explore. But those are just some of the most common ones. Now, in cases where it's cross-border co-parenting, even when things work okay, it's very challenging for parents who don't have paperwork to co-parent with those in Kenya because, again, the obvious fact is that they can't travel to raise their kids. And there's nothing as difficult as raising your kids virtually. Parents really try. They do their best, but eventually some things are going to fall through the cracks. It's very difficult. In fact, if there's one group of parents that I truly empathize with, parents who left kids in Kenya and they don't have paperwork and so they don't have the ability to physically travel. It really gets complicated in the sense that even when they get to the point where they get the legal paperwork and they're able to bring the kids to the US, the adjustment is massive. I've got a friend who left his kids when they were basically toddlers under 5. Now the kids are in high school and she just brought them. And so they are having such a difficult time trying to figure out how to share space. It's just such a new world when the kids have been raised for over 10 years away from the parents. And then all of a sudden, these people have to share space together. It really takes a lot for that arrangement to work. So for those who are in that spot, I truly, really empathize with you guys. Now, as I said earlier, I have not been in these positions, but I observe them around me. So here's some things that I might say as we summarize that. Number one, it is possible to actually co-parent successfully. I've seen multiple examples out there, but I don't think there's any one formula that works across the board. And I hope you find one that works for you. And of course, remember, all co-parenting arrangements will impact kids. And I hope you pick an arrangement that has the least amount of negative impact on your kids. And overall, personally, I stay away from taking relationship advice from African mothers, in part because it always involves some kind of suffering. So all I hope is, whatever the circumstances, please don't use kids as weapons in your battles. And I hope you find something that works for you. Well, that's all I have for you this afternoon, and I will see you in the next. Thank you.